Excellent. Welcome. How's everyone doing? I want to start out with saying that I want this to be more of a discussion. You know, we're at a great conference with a lot of smart people, smarter people in the crowd. So if we're not leveraging opportunities like these to have a conversation about these types of things, you know, we're failing. So not only out, you know, in the what they call LobbyCon, but also inside the conference, I think there should be plenty of interaction. So please feel free to jump in if you got questions or anything, or if I'm off topic, just jump right in. So my name is Tom Gorup. I'm the Security Operations Lead with Rook Security. I'm also the Indiana IT Sector Chief, and then also prior military. Served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and two shameless plugs up there for Hornet's Nest and No Greater Love. Those are two documentaries. They were both, second half of No Greater Love was about my unit when I was in Afghanistan, and the entire one for No Greater Love was is going to be about my unit, and that's coming out later on this summer. They actually brought me down for that one, so I might actually be in it. So pretty cool, pretty fun stuff. I'm also GCI certified and advisor board, stuff like that. So ultimately, what's the problem? Right now, I think we're getting better at it, but IT or security teams are being lumped up inside like an IT budget or within the IT department. Whereas I think it should be a completely separate entity. We need to be breaking that out into its own department, get those C-levels, a seat at the table that's specific to security and not just the availability or the technology piece of it. So that's what I'm going to be jumping through here. Also, not only just making it separate, but departmentalizing it similar to that of IT. So the IT teams have their separate, IT departments have their separate teams within that roll up to IT. We need to be starting applying that to get away from the jack of all trades, master of none mentality. When you have a security analyst come in, their jobs are pretty large. So to start off with is, you know, who do these teams interact with? So IT and security interacts with your internal teams. So other, you know, WinOS teams, your Linux teams, your storage teams, database admins, all across the board. Both your IT team and security team does. A couple extra there is the security team interacts with government entities like the FBI or whoever else they have to affiliate with during a breach of some sort, as well as legal for policy violations or whatever the case might be. So there's a little bit of extra communication involved there, but overall there's a lot of similarities into who IT communicates with and who security departments should communicate with. So the breakdown an IT team, and you know, so organizations are different, but for the most part, they fall into a WinOS team, a virtualization team, an open systems group who focuses on Linux, whatever flavor they're running in that organization. The local support team, someone that goes out to the remote site to make the change or clean the box, whatever the case might be. Your network operations, database administrators, storage, and developers. That kind of rolls up your IT team, for the most part. If I'm missing any, please shout them out there. But where does security fit in all that? Right? They kind of overlap each part of those, and it makes it a little bit complex and potentially convoluted. Right now, security analysts are expected to have a boatload of credentials or capabilities, right? We have to do malware analysis down to project management when we're deploying a new tool or a security device. The expectations of security teams are off the charts. You have to see everything bad, right? If you miss anything, it's security's fault. And that's a problem. We take on the most risk when it comes to not only legal aspects, but also company branding perspectives. Yet sometimes given a lesser budget than the overall IT in general. So I mean that can come both ways. Which is IT making us money? Is security actually making us money? And those are definitely different topics and different talks about how security actually business enablement through security platforms. So my proposal on the breakdown should be in these 6 teams. Start off with you have your communication teams that are working with other other teams within the organization or with your marketing team, your HR department, whoever it might be. They're also leading those project management, those projects of deployment of new security tools or devices. You have your monitoring team. You know, you have that PCI compliance and all those compliancy aspects, and the biggest problem is the continuous monitoring aspect, right? You have to do log reviews every week, month, day, whatever your requirements are there, and by month 2, that's fallen off the track because you have no one that's dedicated to that. You have no one that's being held accountable specifically to do that continuous monitoring of your IDS, firewall, and all the logs on your operating system pieces there. Your threat and vulnerability management. So that same guy is, in some cases, asked to, hey, I want you to scan these 1,000 servers and report on vulnerabilities. Now we want you to work with those individual teams, that WinOS team and that Linux team, and those network operations center to solve that problem. And that becomes complex because your security analyst has to have that breadth of knowledge in order to articulate the problem to those other teams. So it becomes pretty convoluted, especially if you don't have someone dedicated to that, right? Intelligence, that's detecting all the bad things, right? We're able to gather more information. It's specific to your company or your industry, even if it's not actually going out and digging, but being in charge of purchasing or aggregating those that information, that data. And then your incident responders, people that are actually not only doing the forensics aspect, but doing the responding to notifications. Your monitoring team shouldn't necessarily be doing the interaction or resolution piece. Your incident response team should be taking care of that. And then finally, your tactical engineering. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Any of these groups, people are very similar types of people, or skill sets that find that people, incident responders, and
Yes, absolutely. And I failed on not and delivering a slide on that. No, because that was actually something I wanted to show later on. Okay, well, but there is the communication aspect of who they really communicate with, interact with. That really drives that home, and I think that's actually the next slide. So the communication, that team's supposed to deliver to everyone, right? Your monitoring team should be speaking with your IR team and your NOC, right? Because they're doing that continuous monitoring. They should be talking to your network operation team and your incident response team, and your incident response team should be delivering incidents to your IT teams. And this is kind of the breakdown of that communication structure. Those teams really need to be interacting with others. So who owns the stack across the board here? On your IT side, developers hold the application while your NOC holds down to the network level. But where does security fit in all that? The problem is that security has to hit across the board. Your monitoring team is reviewing not just Windows logs or database logs or your network, your Cisco devices logs. They're looking at all of them. So who owns your firewall right now? And that's another question that drives that. Does your IT team own the firewall? How many people here on the security side actually manage your firewall? You do? Excellent. Now, is there a difference between the firewall and then more advanced firewalls? So like your Palo Altos, your IPSs type tipping points. There's the different levels. Should security teams be controlling those Cisco baseline firewalls that are controlling the routing? I think so. But that's a tough line. That's a tough battle to kind of come across the board here. But in the end, the security team covers the entire stack. And if you're not at least dividing up the tasks associated with the individual items, then ultimately your analysts are going to get overwhelmed. That's why we have a burnout rate, right? That's why they say a 2-year burnout rate for security analysts. Part of that is because they're not being specialized. They are the jack of all trades, and they're getting burned out because they can't keep up. And if you don't specialize your team members and at least disperse one member into 2 or 3 groups, then you're not going to keep up. People are going to become overwhelmed. They're going to get burned out. And then finally, you need to address all the processes and policies driving behind that. So just because you have the security team across the board handling, working with the different teams, what does that communication look like? Who's talking to who? When do they escalate what? And then kind of running through those drills. It's kind of running back to the user awareness piece, but that also drives into your operations pieces. What does it look like when an incident occurs? Who are we talking to? Who's applying the blocks to which firewalls? Who's making changes to devices at which location, off-site location? You know, do we have that point of contact sheet that drives behind it? So those are the different questions that need to be brought up during those situations. So, you know, why is all this important? Well, like I said before, it adds to specialization. When somebody's focused more on a specific team or task, they're going to be significantly more successful than if they're having to handle 5 or 6 different teams at a time across the same incident or same task. It enforces accountability within those teams. So when you have to drive back to compliance, you have your monitoring team that's dedicated to continuous monitoring. When that next audit comes around and it's not complete, you have someone to look at and say, why wasn't this complete? This was your job. This is what you are tracked, right? Eases that burden as well. In the end, it also provides that better output, right? So if you have a single analyst or a single group of people delivering to your IT teams, then the output's going to be significantly more precise. It's going to be more accurate because someone's able to take the time to ensure the accuracy, do the research. Because despite, you know, I said we want to get away from the jack of all trades, master of none, but ultimately we still have to take that on at times, right? Even during the threat and vulnerability management piece of it, you know, there's not going to be one person that's overly efficient at being a Windows administrator and a Linux administrator and administrate network devices and be able to report all that in a spectacular manner to each of those teams. It's going to be, there's going to be degradation in one area or the other. So you need that specialization, that focus. It also helps to improve those relationships. I think that's one of the biggest things about security in general is we need to do better at building those relationships. And sometimes we can get frustrated because we are overwhelmed, in turn degrade those relationships when we're starting to deliver vulnerabilities or incidents, or when we see a user click on something that causes frustration, and especially when you see it repeatedly. You care so much about your organization and safety of your organization, but sometimes it might look like others don't when they're doing what they're doing on a daily basis. In turn, can lead to frustration and degradation of that relationship. Yep.
Would you advocate for having someone who is very experienced and very skilled at communicating with other business functions, especially the executive level, as part of the communications team?
Absolutely. Your communications team should be someone that's project oriented, that's really good at taking a lot of information and making it consumable, not only at the executive level, but at the technical level as well, or at least be able to pool in the resources to communicate that. Is there definitely specialized in each area? Your threat intelligence personnel is probably not going to be very good at deploying an IDS or a firewall, or deploying your agents across your organization. Your monitoring team may not be very good at collecting threat intelligence. You know, their job is to look at logs, look at trending of logs, any changes across the board. So these are definitely very specialized tasks in some cases, and you need the right person, right group of people for each position. But the same thing applies to your IT group, right? Your WinOS team isn't consisted of a bunch of Linux administrators. They have Windows certified, you know, administrators within your WinOS team. So we need to be applying those same concepts and techniques to your security teams, your security groups, as you are your IT teams. Otherwise, we're going to continue to get burnout. We're going to continue to fall behind the curve. We're not going to be able to keep up with attackers because we're not having anyone focused. We have a bunch of squirrels running around. That's about how we work right now. New email next. You can't you can't stay dug in. You can't stay focused. And if you can't stay focused, we're going to fail. So we need to break this out in a more controlled manner. Provide more accountability to teams, enabling these teams to do more. Right? A lot of times we're just playing catch up. The entire week, it's catch up to Friday, and you're somewhat caught up on Friday and you're back behind on Monday. Right? And it's that continuous effort. If nobody's dedicated to a specific
Hello, I'm Geek here. Unfortunately, we had a little glitch, and so we lose audio in the speaker until about the 17-minute mark, but it should resume about then. Sorry for the problems.
Visiting, for example, between hundreds of newspapers, and we're a very small part of our organization. Our development group is more specified as X-ray from now. The three of us are a newspaper team, and there's like 40 developers, so there's like huge difference between that and sales, implementation, and all that, which will work. So, what happens a lot of times, even just being with our tech course, is there's a language disconnect, a technical knowledge disconnect, and an understanding of what vulnerabilities and issues there are. They're busy dealing with their day-to-day issues of users and other problems. And so dealing with the security issues in regards to the network, for example, it's hard to communicate to them what the issues are because it's not within their scope of what they're trying to do, and that causes a huge problem. I think all of us probably need something within our organization to act as that communication bridge to trying to be the mediator between the departments.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that, to your point, I think we play more than just security now with regard to communication. This plays every IT segment throughout our process, right? Developers can't talk to security, can't developers. BI guys can't stand anybody else, right? So there's this communication piece. There's this term that's been thrown out there, solutions architect, right? You hear that term talked around, and the ideal behind that is that this person has enough information about the span to be able to translate, communicate, and coordinate those efforts. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough highly educated people across the span to be able to talk literally across all of that appropriately. And I think that's something that's happening here. Primarily because the actual phase master is not, right? Where we find ourselves not wanting to be jack of all trades. You have to be for the work. But we want to be this. We want to be malware. We want to be XYZ, right? And we find ourselves, you know what? That's not our focus. I don't put my time on hack. Everything else is going to have to do it. So there's no real enthusiasm to really want to do that well.
Yeah.
Because I don't care about it. And I think that's that challenge that comes to play with us a lot. And I don't think everybody can do that job. Right?
Yes, I think that's a great solution, the solutions architect piece. But like you said, how do you find someone that can articulate to not only your executives, because he's going to be reporting up to someone, but also to other IT teams, and keep. Well, if that's the sole job of that person. That,
You have to get someone that has the ability to learn quickly, understand concepts, have enough experience by having touched things in the past where you're not talking out of the basket or the book, right? If you could have actually done it, screwed up, you know, I've told you around enough in the space to be able to communicate that. That's a challenge.
I think that's a good point. Also, though, is that person needs to not apply opinion when they're reporting this information to the other teams. They need to take facts only when they disperse it, and reporting up or down or laterally.
So I would very much agree with the role that we're kind of discussing right now really is in SecOps. And that's really kind of structural in the business. Let's say there's a unit perspective kind of where a lot of organizations are finding that role typically is in larger organizations of business versus
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and their job is to kind of intermediate between SecOps and then the communication of the business level as well as lateral. But most organizations aren't doing that. And that's a challenge.
You know, the long answer for individualization happens for us to look at right? You know, a long time for that, you know, window and Linux all the same people,
Right.
You know, one person doing virtualization and not all at once, right? You know, that still exists, but it's still years down the road where they start to realize that virtualization does have value. And security around is so vague of the majority of people out there. Specialization is part of that.
I agree with that.
Nothing to slam on CIS or CEO, like, and nothing to slam on FICO, is that ostensibly your job, right? We want to make these CIS was supposed to be that guy, he was supposed to be that function. Unfortunately, they get actually involved in a lot of policy writing or whatever, instead of an actual understanding of the technical underpinning. One of the largest problems we have in the industry is we are a hugely young industry overall. The industry of information security is very small. I mean, IT has been around since the 50s and 60s. As a concept, that information security is relatively new and huge growth. And we obviously recognize the fact that there is a need for specialization. It's how to go back to an organization or a company and say, look, while it's nice to do things that one person can do all these things, and maybe our budget only allows us to have 10 people, we need to find a way to start thinking about dividing some of these responsibilities and allowing our people to target their work with something interesting, where they're going to be passionate and they're going to drive knowledge, and they're going to drive the learning, then forcing them into square pegs, round holes and square pegs that they may not look and expecting perfect results. We all know that can't happen.
Right.
But most organizations have an expectation today, or at least we'll get a box.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those expectations are huge, right? Detect all the bad things.
One of the ways our organization addresses it, our security team is relatively siloed, but they always needed us to sort of run the show that we're in the other teams. What they did was they actually opened up training to all of the other teams, the server, the developers, the database, and said, we're going to pay. And the people that picked up on that then became part of the internal
Well, it's almost like what do you think about your kids? You want. I mean, I know I'd like my kids to grow up into a security. I think it's a growing industry, if not something IT, right? You have to look at outsiders as kind of from the same perspective. How do you drive that passion? How do you make them just as passionate about security as you are? How do you? And I'm sure there were plenty of talks, though, that were focused around, securing a database or even breaking those databases.
They also take for the security team to go to developer conferences and other, part of the security thing was we were going to developers talking about vulnerability management. Hey, you guys need to give us your vulnerability management plan. And they're like, we're not crazy for that. As soon as you walk into how do you QA and you think, well, they're like, oh, okay.
Right.
And they had that. Disconnect in lingo that was a stopgap.
Right. I think that's an outstanding point. So, we talk about disconnect between talking to C-levels because we're security and we have a problem getting funds, but can we even talk to the other IT departments? Can we do that well? So, I mean, we have a lot of internal improvement, especially around communication. And communication we're not really good at it because a lot of us are introverts, right? Or we want to be too technical and explain things too precisely, in turn losing people halfway through the conversation.
So I have a comment and then a question for the group. So one of the things that I do a lot of times with executives and managers outside of the IT group is that people in the IT group, especially the leaders, aren't very good business. They really are good at technology, but they're not really good at business. So my question for you guys in the group is, how would you feel about working for a CISO or a CIO that knew a little bit about technology but a lot about business? What are the drawbacks to having somebody like that in a leadership position? There are no drawbacks to that. That's what you
I don't know, from my perspective, I would almost rather have that. We're in a position that, trust me, right? I don't need to be as part of me. I don't need to teach me. I just need you to trust me. I will do that. I am getting my reputation, everything is on me. And if you have a question, everything I have to do that. You can bring it up and talk to me. You have to answer it as right? If you want me to keep the room on my computer, I'll do something more productive. All right?
By the way, I like everything you said except the part about
Well, but this is the other thing, right? And to your point earlier, I'm a DBA. My trade is a DBA. I've got an experience of 30 years. And I love talking about it. I'm a consultant. So I know how to talk to that. I learned how to talk to that. I'm a solutions architect. So I talk to span. And we do exist. Where we go, we do exist. And it's hard to find. It's hard to find those, right? And get someone that's passionate about something. It's really hard to find someone passionate about anything.
Yeah. It's tough. Absolutely. And that kind of comes back to the communication piece of it. So how are you articulating those problems to those team members?
So if you're saying like, you guys and executive leadership certainly have knowledge, so we have benefit of developing our
Nice.
Last summer, we did a enterprise-wide risk assessment, quantitative with Gallup figures and everything. If this happens, we don't do this, and this is how much we lose. That's the language they speak. And so help with that, target, and all of that, chairman is like, what do you need, what do you need?
Right.
And it's more than really rules all the time, it's really people get stuck in the face.
People, the right people, right? Those motivated people.
One of the things that we worked out in our group was, we have lots of sysadmins, but we don't have systems inspectors for that. And we were required as a company to take some active shooter training. And it was, what we do when this is happening in your environment, or what you said. And we took that training and spun it to say, you're an excellent sysadmin, but what do you do when somebody's doing something bad to those systems? And we did start, we changed the tone from we're not telling them how to actually harden or configure their system. We just started asking the question, what do you do when? How do you do this? And have them start thinking about it and giving us the answers back. Instead of us telling them how to do it, we started asking them the questions.
I think that's awesome. I think that's very valuable. Leading that communication with questions, kind of not only humbling yourself, it's almost a social engineering piece of it, but also getting the answers that we need, kind of running through the exercise, a tabletop almost, just led through questions and discussion. A lot more informal, probably a lot more productive than when you sit people down in a room sometimes.
One of the terms that I've been taking is through a lot of education or so forth. And one of the things that we do is trying to get them to realize that a GPA job is to maintain a server, right? Secure the database, ensure the data is available at all times and not available to someone, blah, 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 right? And it's like, okay, whose responsibility is it to do that? How do you know this? But at the end of the day, the company takes the data. Whichever parameter is going to be in, how can all of those accountable? You have no clue what they're doing. If you have no clue how to get in, you have no clue how it happened. And I have these conversations with systems. Windows admins are like, it's fine, you can deploy it out in service. Great question. You have a PowerShell on site. What's the provision for running this? How are you going to respond and help them down right? I didn't know. No. What are you doing to protect yourself as an individual with that position of authority? Because at the end of the day, it's just your job to go at it. You're going to pay the price. Because if we're here, how can you not know your responsibility to spend those services? Your responsibility to
It might roll uphill in certain circumstances. If we don't have the right policies and process in place, it's going to fall into management or executive level when they're not asking those questions downward. But if they're not asking downward because they don't know any better, and then we're not articulating upward, it's a complete disconnect, and you have things, you have these major incidents that you hear in the news because there's no user awareness. And when I say user awareness in this perspective, I'm talking about IT teams laterally speaking to each other, communicating. That's definitely a huge problem. So I hear a lot of leading those discussions through questions. I think that was a real big win there. And also the solutions architect I think is a great solution if you can find the right person behind it. And in finding the right people to fill those jobs that are passionate about something, security, right? Are you going to say something?
Yeah, one of the other things that we've done to try and break the security silo and get more people involved with a lot of places, the security tool is only for the security team. And what we started to do is actually take a lot of the attack tools, the vulnerability tools, and our developers, yes, run Fiddler, yes, run First, play with those against your own code. All the OS and servers, here's your vulnerability scanner, scan your stuff, play with it, and we've disseminated the tools outside of the security wall to the teams that would be impacted by that.
Right, just making it more fun, probably, as well. I mean, who doesn't like to break something? I mean, I don't care who you are, security or not, it'd still be fun to grab shell on any application or server. Any other pain points? I feel like the biggest one is communication when it comes across the board.
So the many mentioned you're not really going to address the conversation process things for security compliance cost. But assuming you got to go that road, and all of a sudden you have to, I know another problem going on right now. Unless you're a huge company, so you look at it, three guys in this company. It's hard to find people that work people and not have enough. Because we kept those three different sections, all of a sudden the team of two runs down to a team of 10. Something like that. You want to really specialize. And unless you're a really big company, unfortunately, security, I think, is now at the moment, I mean, commoditized sector. You're not big enough, you're going to have to get somebody like Gorup that says, yes, I can do all of these things for you, and then how are you going to do the communication plan if you're a third party?
Well, I think the communication plan is what makes third parties like us successful, right? So we can't be just throwing things over the wall like your typical large MSS office. You can't do it. That's not going to solve any problem, and that's not the way we work. So I think it's important to make sure if you're going to choose an MSS or so. That's where I was going to get at. Is obviously internal you do have your budget limitations, so you can only purchase so many tools, you can only buy so many people, and then also finding the people is tough and retaining that talent. So you pick and choose what you can do practically in-house, and what can be outsourced, and what you're willing to accept the risk on. Right? So you're able to look at these teams and say, well, we can man those two teams in-house. We can outsource maybe the log review piece of it, and we'll accept the risk behind the tactical engineering and intelligence aspect. Or maybe we'll get a third party to give us that intelligence feed. So it's about accepting risk, identifying what you can do in-house, and then outsourcing whatever you feel you can't accept the risk on. Go back to the communication piece. That whoever you hire, that third party, has to communicate. They have to become more of a partnership. They can't. They're not making you secure by just throwing something over the wall at you. They're not making you secure by not helping out your end users when they have a security incident, or helping out those specific IT teams when they have an incident. They're not doing anything for you. You can get an IDS to take care of that if that's what you want. You have to find a provider that's actually going to communicate and help make you more secure, and push back when you start potentially making a decision that's going to lead you down a bad road. I had a customer the other day that said they wanted their brute force attempts. They want them all lumped up at the end of the week. They didn't want to apply blocks or anything like that. They didn't want real-time notification on it. Said at the end of the week, let me know about all the brute force attacks. So you want a week. You want to leave a week for that brute force attack to occur, and then you want me to tell you about it. That doesn't seem like a practical solution to me, right? So, we sat down and had a discussion about it. And it was about that communication piece and understanding. I mean, from his perspective, he was a network admin. From his perspective, that's too much work. But we can help out with that. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. So you need to find someone that's willing to have those hard discussions and not just roll over because, you think something's harder. We need to talk about what does the process look like, what policies do we want to put in place, and what risks are you actually willing to accept an informed decision, not just, this is too much work. We need to talk this through a little bit. So I think that those are, I don't know, I guess that's my answer to the long-winded answer to that question. Mm-hmm. Exactly. But we need to start driving that change of perspective that security rolls up underneath IT. We don't. We're a different department. It's completely different. We have our own tools, we have our own people, we have our own specializations, just like your IT team does. It's just, you know, how much money are you going to put forth to maintain that brand? That brand reputation is what's important, and that's what drives it. Mm-hmm.
It's when we start getting into IR and but there's gray areas, there's a lot, some of
Yes, yeah, and that's where I had mentioned earlier, who controls your firewalls? You know, and what types of firewalls? Maybe that's what drives the separation. Are we talking about standard open, closed port Cisco firewalls? Or are we talking about the Palo Altos and Tipping Points IPSs that are a little bit more advanced, more like an IDS, which should be controlled by your, I'm assuming, your security team. So maybe that's where you identify those separations.
you have, you know, IT is gray area on SecOps and deployment on the technology side, right, for the business relationships.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
SecOps, and then this other area over here, you know, security business relationship. It's their job to ensure that, you know, what business needs are have to get that. That's their main thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's where kind of that the solutions architect that was mentioned before, I think that's a good role for someone like that to be able to give the facts in a meaningful way, not overly technical, explaining risks identified by the security team and the IT teams, showing, you know, maybe mapping it to CIA or wherever that takes you, but ultimately dollars is what speaks well upward. And I think having the program that he had mentioned earlier, what did you say your company had gone through? The risk. Yes. Yeah, so we put dollars to servers. So. Yeah, and I think that's what helps articulate those problems, right? We can put $1 on a server, and that then can be applied to the new Palo Alto or whatever firewall you need to purchase, or that another log review team member because you're just overwhelmed with terabytes of logs on a daily basis, or the new SIM tool to help plow through those logs. I think a ticketing system is usually something that's usually talked about, undervalued. You know, if you can't articulate upward how much work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, then you're going to fail. If you don't have those metrics, if you don't have a ticketing system in place, you can't present facts to any type of management. So I think sometimes that's underplayed. Coming to a lot of situations where there is no ticketing system, so that not only takes away accountability, because we all know emails get lost in the trash can, but tickets, not so much. Those, you know, as long as you have somebody administrating that. But okay, I guess I have 5 minutes. Hey, everybody have anything else? No? I think it was a great discussion. Thank you. Thanks.